Heyo, we are back for the true crime of April. I swear, if this does not show you how fast life passes us by, I don't know what does. Because I feel like it was just yesterday we were sitting here and we were doing last month. So welcome on. How's it going? How's life?
Life is life. Um, it's been crazy. I'm way better than the last time we recorded. I'll tell you that. Like, I'm not dying. So there's
Me
that.
either. Me either. We sound like ourselves again. Thank goodness. We were
Right. I
pretty
know.
sick. So
I,
yeah, this one, I just got to say, trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning out the yang. This episode is, this is a tough one. When you're like, hey, how about you pick this one? Because we have a really big one that's coming up next month for the month of May for an anniversary of a true crime passing. This one, I immediately knew I wanted to do. And it's so hard to talk about a topic of the loss of a child. There is nothing worse than that. When you're talking about the loss of a child from the hands of their own mother, this one is disturbing. So just want to get that out there, fresh out the gate, trigger warning. There are going to be some audio and some playbacks that may be very difficult for those to listen to or to hear. So just want to warn everybody before you start kind of diving deep. So we're going to talk about it. June 2023. She was on a 10-day vacation in Puerto Rico, and she posted a photo, and she just needed a mental break. When we hear that, we think, okay, yeah, everyone needs a mental break. But when you really deep dive into this, it was a little girl. Her name was Jailyn, 16 months old, left in a playpen for 10 days with just a few bottles of milk. That was Candelario's daughter that she left behind when she went on vacation.
yeah, as a mom myself, I just cannot fathom this happen. Like, what? Excuse my language. The fuck? Because I could never picture myself as a mother leaving my children, like, ever for any amount of time like that. Days, like a week and a half. I mean, you think about it, you say 10 days and it's like 10 days. Then when you say a week and a half, it just seems to make it like worse, I mean, jail is going to be rough for her. Prison, like, I giggle because those women, I hope justice is served while she is in prison.
Yeah. There's a lot that's been coming out. This happened June of 2023, but she was just sentenced last month. Man, I mean, I sit and I listen to audio and playbacks, and, I can't even begin to imagine, first of all, the law enforcement team that was on the call and that has been on this case. So many have stated that this was the most harrowing passing that they've ever seen in their law enforcement career. Not just because she was a child, but how she passed and the extensive trauma that this little girl went through. But it also brings up questions, as always true crime does, of, like you said, excuse my language, where the fuck was everybody during this time? There are neighbor Ring cameras that you can hear the audio of this little girl. And the very last one was around 1 a.m. that they last heard her. My question is, there is video camera of showing her leaving in a vehicle with her suitcase. So obviously, this is a case where we need to be those nosy neighbors. I know sometimes I'm that nosy neighbor that's peeking out my window, or I'm like, okay, somebody's making a lot of noise. But it makes me wonder, where the fuck were you? Because you saw that there was no vehicle outside of this house, and you hear a child making very traumatic audible sounds. There is a video, not going to play that. If you want to hear that, it's all over social media platforms. You can hear that in this little girl's voice. I mean, I'm not even a mother, and I can hear something's wrong. You cannot tell me that those neighbors did not hear that. And where the fuck were you?
Yeah, I heard that the first time I heard it on TikTok. I mean, it's a long video. I would say 10, 15 seconds in, I'm sobbing because it's like like you said, where the fuck is everybody? Where are the neighbors? Like this is the time where it's okay to be the nosy neighbor. It's okay to walk up on someone's porch and look in the house because you see for multiple days there's no vehicle in the driveway. You see that probably there's constant in and out of this house because she does have a very young child. So it's in and out for diapers, in and out for milk, in and out for this and that. And you see there's no activity in the house, but yet you hear a child crying traumatically and you just are like, meh, whatever. No, this is the point where you go up, you be a nosy neighbor, you look in the doors, you look in the windows, you fucking call someone to do a welfare check and check on that child. Because not only, in my opinion, is obviously the mother guilty and she's where she's supposed to be. In my opinion, she should be a little worse off. But that's beside the point. The neighbors and the community also failed this child.
100%. They asked so many people, because now that's what's coming up of, where's the neighbors and, where are all those people? And, the neighbors, I understand a little bit. They're like, this isn't our responsibility because we just live next door. But they stated that this wasn't something out of the normal for that household, that there was constant screaming and crying and things like that. But it brings me to that point. There's no vehicle there. There's no adult present. Like you can see, like you said, people going in, 10 days, a week and a half, and you didn't notice that there was no car in the driveway. There was no adult activity in or out or people coming over, but yet you still hear a child. Like, I'm sorry. I think you need to be held partially responsible. But they say, oh, well, it's just on our Ring doorbell. You can hear that. You get an alert if you have a Ring. I do. I get alerted when there's audio, noises, sounds, movement. So come on. I think we've become so closed off behind our four walls of if it's not in our home, it doesn't concern us. I mean, we follow this rule. If we see a dog left alone in a car, we're allowed to take, to take action. So what, you can't even like that call the police department if you see or hear something that just doesn't seem right? I'm sorry. I totally think on this one, they just turn their heads completely.
Yeah, I agree. I remember probably 10 years ago when I lived in Cincinnati, I was leaving my apartment complex and I remember seeing a vehicle and a girl got out and it stayed there. And there was like, you could tell there was like weirdness and it was just odd. And then the guy got out, come around the car and like almost forced her back in the vehicle. And I was like, that's not normal. And I called 911 and I was like, hey, I don't think it's an emergency, but this is going on outside this apartment complex on like this street. You might want to send somebody to check it out. And like, it could have been nothing. It could have just been a couple arguing. But at the end of the day, it could have been somebody kidnapping somebody. You never fucking know what's going on in the world. And I think as a society and as a community and as a country, we've just become so accustomed to it's not our business. Let's not intervene unless it's like drama, like you get on social media and people want to get on their keyboards and type. But when it's out in public and it's like in reality and it's in front of you, people don't want to intervene. And it's like, that's when you need to intervene. This is when you should have intervened and you did it. And look what happened.
It's not my business, not my problem kind of a mentality until something bad happens. And it's like, oh, well, if I was there, okay, neighbors, you were there. So where were you and why? So she was seen on security video leaving her home on June 6th with her suitcase, like we said, to her car. She did not return until June 16th. She was not in Puerto Rico the whole time. She did go there on vacation with a male friend. She was there for a few days, and then she traveled to Detroit. So she did technically have two different trips in her little stint of 10 days. Within a matter of minutes of her getting home, she called 911. Which makes me wonder, like, what did you expect to happen? Like, what did you expect to walk into after 10 days?
Yeah.
But I think what really, even saying this, it just makes my skin crawl, is that she dressed Jailyn, her deceased daughter, in a clean outfit before emergency responders arrived.
Yeah.
To say you were trying to cover up anything possible, what happened to this little girl traumatically, her body showed so many things. A clean outfit didn't do shit. How degrading of a human being can you be? That was the thought in her mind of, well, let's change her outfit. Why? Because she was covered in her own feces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, you're a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like, I mean, like you said, what did you expect to find? Really, what did you expect? I mean, you left her for 10 days with a couple bottles in a playpen by herself. She's 16 months old. What the fuck did you expect? I mean, come on.
Mm-hmm.
It just baffles me.
Yep. And the emergency responders, when they got there, they stated, just the state of torture that little girl went through. Yeah. I mean, I can't even begin to imagine. She was found lying on a mattress, covered in her own feces and urine. She had feces in her mouth. She had feces under her fingernails. She was literally surviving on her own bodily fluids in order to survive because she was left alone for 10 days. And at the end of it, during the autopsy, it showed that she weighed 7 pounds less than what she had previously weighed in just 2 months prior at one of her pediatric visits. 7 pounds for a 16-month-old, that's a lot of weight. For those that may not know and are not parents or not familiar, 7 pounds is a lot.
In 10 days. It's a lot of weight lost. Yeah, it is. Because, I mean, they say like kids gain weight. And I mean, when you leave the hospital with a baby, they actually lose weight, because of how much nutrition they lose just from when they're first born to when they start drinking either breast milk or formula, whichever you choose. And so babies actually lose anywhere from like 1 to 2, if not 3 pounds when they're first born. And by the time you go back to your first doctor's appointment, which is usually 1 to 2-ish weeks after you have them, they normally gain that 1 to 2 to 3 pounds back. So that's normal. So for her to lose 7 in a week is just insane. It's insane.
Yep. And there was a court forensic pathologist that stated that children experience the most extreme separation anxiety from the time they're around 9 months to about 18 months was the range that they gave in court. So we're not only talking about, obviously, the physical trauma that she went through in her passing, but the emotional and the separation anxiety. She doesn't understand. And I mean, Of course, there's videos that are going across the internet of, showing her running to her mom and her mom leaving. And, there's a lot, obviously, with TikTok and social platforms that, everybody wants to be the investigator and stuff like that, which to me is so, it's good, but it's bad because it gets so many other people talking and involved. And that's when a lot of things can be misconstrued. So especially on this episode, we have some things that are directly from the court, their audio that we're going to play and listen to together. All the information and description in the bio will state where we got them from. WKYC Channel 3 that's based in Cleveland, where this occurred, is one of them, as well as CNN when the judge gave her sentencing. So I always want to say that too. There's a lot going on with true crime. When you open up a platform, you're going to see things and audios and, it's heart-wrenching. It really is. So you have the audio of one of them that we're going to play right now in regards to the court hearing. So what do we got?
Yeah, this is the one of the medical examiner that did Jailyn's autopsy. So this is her actually giving her findings from the autopsy. And I found this on TikTok, but it is from the actual court hearing. So I'll go ahead and play it. I think it's like 5.5, almost 6 minutes long. So
my name is Dr. Elizabeth Birdie, and it's spelled Mooney. I am currently employed by Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office as a forensic pathologist and deputy medical examiner. In this capacity, I was assigned the task of performing an autopsy on little girl Jailyn Candelario in order to determine her cause and manner of death. Unfortunately, this is one of the most tragic and unfortunate cases I've had in my career thus far. So today I speak on behalf of her and her findings with the course of my examination. We received Jailyn at the medical examiner's office from the scene of her residence, at which time she was clothed in non-soiled clothing, indicating her body had likely been dressed prior to first responders' arrival, as they had mentioned before. So at autopsy, I examined the body of a very emaciated female toddler. At this point, she weighed 13 pounds. Upon review of medical records, this indicated approximately a 7-pound weight loss since her previous doctor's visit less than 2 months prior to that. The eyes were sunken and she had temporal wasting in her face. In addition to that, the skin showed markedly decreased turgor, meaning when I pinch the skin, it remains in that tented position, indicating severe dehydration. In addition, there was abundant fecal material present, capes on the fingers, the fingernails, the hands, the feet, as well as the soles of the feet. The same material was found on her lips, which were very dry and flaking, as well as in her oral cavity, caked to her teeth. She did have some diaper rash appearance, as well as fecal material adherent to those areas. Of note, the body was essentially free of significant injury, with the exception of dried excoriations or scratches to the face region predominantly, and whether or not these were inflicted to herself in a conscious or semi-conscious state while she was dying, I'm unable to determine. Very early decompositional changes were present. This included faint discoloration or green discoloration of the abdomen. These are typically changes that we see within 2 to 3 days following death. No additional changes to suggest that she passed away prior to this were found externally or internally. Upon internal examination, I continued to find evidence consistent with starvation and dehydration. These included pale discoloration of the musculature, which was minimal. There was a decrease in intra-abdominal fat to the point of transparency as her body tried to feed upon itself for nutrients. Her stomach contents consisted of less than 2 milliliters of brown mucoid material. This is about equivalent to the distal part of my thumb, a very small amount. The rest of her bowel just contained patchy fecal material, but very minimal throughout. Her organs, including her liver, kidneys, and thymic gland, showed evidence of stress, specifically microscopically on exam. I found no additional evidence of significant natural disease going on or congenital abnormalities. Following my exam, I submitted body fluids for additional toxicology and chemistry testing, which further confirmed my gross findings that she had passed in a state of severe dehydration. Her kidneys had failed, and she was in a state of ketoacidosis, which leads to coma and eventually death. As such, I determined the cause of death to be just that, starvation and severe dehydration due to pediatric neglect. To come to the exact wording of the cause of death was based on my findings, but also the medical definitions, which I'd like to reiterate here. Dehydration, and specifically starvation, is a lengthy and continuous deprivation of food as to cause suffering or death. Pediatric neglect is the failure of a caregiver to meet adequately a child's basic needs, including physical safety, protection, food, clothing, shelter, education, medical or dental care, and supervision. In other words, neglect for Jailyn's basic needs from a caregiver resulted in her death. As such, I ruled this manner to be homicide. Most homicide deaths involve acts of violence inflicted from one person onto another. But this case involves a failure to act appropriately to support another who is dependent on it, falling into a homicidal manner. In the absence of more advanced decompositional changes, I believe that the pain and suffering she endured lasted not only hours, not days, but possibly even a week. This is a pain that comes from an extreme thirst and hunger. It also stems from an inherent terror of isolation or the lack of someone present to provide them. My knowledge on the depth of this suffering may not be as extensive as a medical or a mental health professional, but as a physician with psychiatric and pediatric training, I feel comfortable stating that the deprivation of food coupled with physical isolation and caregiver abandonment would be terrifying. We know that babies and children cry when they're hungry because it's unsettling and it's uncomfortable. That's almost immediately after birth. We also know that children as early as age 4 to 5 months experience separation anxiety, with the most extreme anxiety around 9 to 18 months. Jailyn was 16 months old. This feeling of abandonment for days on end, coupled with the pain of starvation and extreme thirst, is a type of suffering I don't think any of us could ever fully fathom. So, as a forensic pathologist, it is said that we are the voice of the dead and given the responsibility to speak for those who can't. So this morning, I'm honored to maintain that mission. Thank you.
That case and that autopsy will stick with that woman for the rest of her life.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I mean, I can't even, let alone just like seeing it, but then having to do an autopsy on her, I wouldn't be able to sleep.
Mm-mm.
I don't know
I
how
mean,
to do it sometimes.
Even that's why we talked about it at the beginning, even during sentencing, in the court and stuff, so many law enforcement, they were trying to hold back tears, I think the biggest question when it comes to true crime, that's always the question of why. And when it comes to a child, it's even bigger why. So we're going into this side of it because, we obviously gave the information of what happened to Jailyn the first, 20 minutes of this episode. I have a problem with this. Why? Because I do talk about mental health on my podcast and something you talk about a lot on yours as well. Her parents pled with the judge for mercy on their daughter, stating she had battled mental health illnesses, fainting spells. She had stopped taking medication, which had worsened anxiety and it had worsened her depression, which I have to ask again, where the fuck were you? She was a single mother that displayed depression, that displayed anxiety, fainting spells. You are not in an adequate position to be a single parent. And yet everybody just wiped their hands and walked away. Yeah. That's not an excuse. Like, especially in this situation, that's not an excuse. Again, not my business, not my problem, but, when it's a family member and we are talking about depression and anxiety and medication and coming off medication, there's no excuse. There's none. For me in this, there's none.
I have been a single mom for a very long time. I have battled depression and anxiety and had fucking suicidal thoughts. I'll be the first to admit it. I've been on and off of medication. I have switched medication. I have been out of medication. But there has never, ever been a time where I would do this to my children.
Mm-hmm.
Ever. My children have always been my saving grace. They're the reason I'm still fucking here.
And so many people are asking about the dad. It always seems to be, she's a single mom. Where's the dad? Does the dad know? The dad is aware. It's sad. He had to learn of the passing of his own child through the news. He lives in Ecuador. Him and the mother, they met on Facebook, of all places. And they had a little getaway trip. She flew to Ecuador. They met in person. They went to the Dominican Republic. She returned back to Ohio. He returned back to Ecuador. He had never met his daughter. They had done video chats and, different things like that. But he had never physically in person met his daughter. And he learned of her passing by watching the news.
Like, I can't even imagine that. Like,
Mm-mm.
There's just no, I don't even want to imagine that. But like I said, my children have always been my saving grace. I could never imagine, because of my mental health, harming my children. There's no way. And like you said, I talk about it on my podcast. We've talked about it with each other as friends so many times. And My mental health would never push me to harm my children. There's no excuse. There's just no excuse for that. I don't think I just don't I don't understand it. I never will. Nothing will make me ever understand the why in this case. In any child
Yeah.
abuse case. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't.
And she
Mental health is not the excuse here.
No, and
Not.
it's weird because she didn't remove herself or cut herself off from family and friends and stuff like that. I mean, now friends are starting to speak out and they're like, she used to ask us to watch her children because she has another child. She has an older child. And she's like, they used to ask us all the time to watch her children for long periods of time. And they said they're like, it got to the point where we said, no, we are not watching your children anymore. So that leads me to not understand, but leads me to see why she chose to leave her behind and go on vacation, because she had burned the bridges. Her entire support community was done and over with because she had continued this pattern so often. But I mean, looking at this, I mean, I'm going to play it. It's from the court. It's from CNN. And it's also, this one comes from the WKYC Channel 3, which is in Cleveland, which is where it happened. The fact that they gave her a chance, I mean, I understand guilty, you're innocent until proven guilty, but she did admit to it. She did claim guilt. They allowed her to speak. And again, it was the most, I'm going to play it now for everybody to hear. It's disgusting. She does speak Spanish. So just a heads up, she did her little speech. If I'm going to call it a speech, it's an act. In my opinion, it is in Spanish. There is a court-designated translator of how and what she feels her why is. And I'm interested to talk about that when this is over.
There's so much here at Earth and Ross. This is like more idea of foreign investor. It's really hurt. It's about everything that's touched. And let's look at the justicia we have those. I am not trying to justify my actions. Pero nadie sabe cuánto yo estaba sufriendo. But nobody knew how much I was suffering. Y lo que estábamos in what was going through. Todos los días le miro perdonar a Dios. Every day, I ask forgiveness from God, from my daughter, Jailyn. Soy una persona creyente de Dios. I'm a person who believes in God. Y reconozco hoy que todos y todas, muchas ocasiones, somos tentados por el enemigo. And I recognize today that all of us are sometimes subject to the enemy. Dios y mi hija me ha perdonado. God and my daughter have forgiven.
And it cuts off because where she says, that second part, I just can't. It's God and my daughter, Jailyn, forgive me.
Bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I feel about it. Bullshit.
Yeah.
To kind of go off what you said before you played it too, where it's like she'd burned all of her bridges. If her parents were so concerned with her mental health and were pleading for mercy because of her mental health, why the hell didn't they take her child?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or if they didn't want to take her child, I mean, in the state of Ohio, they even have their own perinatal mental health support group. It's called POEM. I'm going to put their information in the bio description because if you're listening and you're in the state of Ohio, I was born and raised there, so this really hits home. There's a lot of different state assistance things. Granted, yes, they can take a lot of time, but like that, if you are concerned about a family's mental health and they have children, you need to step in and do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. No matter I mean, even her friends that she had burned all those bridges. Like, if she asked for that much help and everybody was so tired of watching and her mental health was such a huge concern. I mean, listen, I understand that CPS is not always the answer. Child Protective Services is not always the answer. You don't want someone's child taken away from them. But when it results in a death of a child, CPS was the right answer in this situation. Someone else taking that child away from her to prevent what happened was the right answer.
Yeah. It amazes me because I remember like in history class, in high school learning about, in China, they were, back in the days and decades ago, generations ago, you're only allowed to have one boy and one girl, and then you were done. And I always go back to this when it comes to the loss of a child. In the United States, and pretty much not everywhere, obviously, but here, I'm talking about here where we live, you have to have a license to even buy cigarettes. You have to have an ID to buy alcohol. You have to go to extreme measures, because I know this because I relocated and I'm trying to transfer a license from one state to the next. And I seriously have to give my firstborn that's never even, come to fruition and my blood type in order to get a new license. But you don't have to have a license and you don't have to have anything to have a child. That amazes me. I go back to that every single time. I will sit in a restaurant, and yes, I'm that person, because I don't have children, that's like, oh my God, get control of your children. I'm like, we're dealing with mental health in the world that we live in now. And, like we all have an enemy. We're dealing with some deep, dark shit that not even our grandparents or our great-grandparents did. So don't you think we might want to start making some requirements or making some more options? I mean, postpartum's a thing. That wasn't a thing when my mom had me or my grandma had her. That wasn't a thing. So why are we not doing more for all of the things that people are starting to really deep dive into? Why are we not helping people? Do I think something would have helped her? Probably not. I think that there is a very warm area in the depths of hell for this person, if I'm being real and honest here. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it's crazy because my friend Chelsea and I were just talking about this on Friday of last week. And it's like with our generation, we've been through so much traumatic things just as a generation. Like we've had 9/11, we've had coronavirus, we've had all of the school shootings, we've had, there's just so many things like as millennials, as a generation that we've dealt with. And mental health is a huge one that we have had to kind of like learn about ourselves, figure it out for ourselves, come up with names for it for ourselves, and figure out how to like navigate it on our own. There was no terms for it. There was no book for it. There was no anything. Like we've had to figure out what it is, write the books, learn how to deal with like all of it on our own. And so it just baffles me that it's like there's so many options out there nowadays that could have prevented this. And there were all of the warning signs, all of the red flags were there. And it's like her parents, I mean, you go back to her parents, wanting mercy for her. What about the child that died? What about the child that died? You are asking for mercy for someone who murdered their child. And not just like, you didn't just go out here and it was like a quick, endless, non-suffering sort of thing. Like this is the worst of the worst kind of suffering upon any human being, especially a child. And you saw the warning signs and you ignored them. You didn't offer to help her and take the child or find another home for the child or nothing that we saw or that we know of that I'm aware of to help her.
I loved in the court hearing prosecutors. I can't imagine being on this case, first of all. I just... But the prosecution team even stated that animals treat their young better than she ever did. The judge did state when he read her sentencing, just as you didn't let Jailyn out of her confinement until she died, so you too should spend the rest of your life in a cell without freedom. And the only difference is that prison will at least feed you. He stated in her first hearing that he let her child be trapped in a tiny prison for days while she was out having a good time, that she committed the ultimate act of betrayal, as a bond between a mother and a child is one of the most purest and most sacred bonds. I'm going to play this sentencing because I don't know about you, but when we talk about true crime, and I always wonder if, there's people are just becoming worse, or if we're kind of, like you said, dealing with trauma and stuff like that. But there is a look when it comes to someone who has committed such a heinous crime. Her eyes are empty. They're dark. She is just soulless when he is speaking to her. So again, this is from CNN. This is from the actual sentencing last month, from the judge himself.
Ultimate act of betrayal. Leaving your baby terrified, alone, unprotected, to suffer what I heard was the most gruesome death imaginable, with no food, no water, no protection, and lying in her own feces. You decided you needed a vacation. You left your baby, Jailyn, trapped in a pack and play without food and water for 10 days. I'm going to sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
So here's my question, because I know what my stance is on this, because I obviously have family in law enforcement. Do you believe in the death penalty? And or do you believe in the death penalty for this case?
Absolutely. I've always been an eye for an eye, because I was raised that way, for one. But coming into my adulthood and growing my own opinions, as an adult, and learning things and seeing things, I'm still very much the same. If it can be proven, or if they admit 100% without a doubt that they are the ones who did it. Sometimes I'm a little, and I hate to be like, oh, she's hypocritical because she said she is, but then she has a but in there. But it's like, if there's any shadow of a doubt, then I'm like, there's some of those cases where it's just like, I just don't know. But there's also those cases where it's like, without a doubt, there's no shadow of a doubt that they did it, or no shadow that they admit it. And it's like, or they're caught in the middle, whatever the case may be, they're caught in the middle of doing it. Those sort of things. Absolutely. It's just like, and I hate to bring up another case in with this one, but it is related to children as well. But the guy who lined up his 3 boys and shot them execution style. To me, he ought to be stood outside of the prison, and as many people are allowed, fire in on him. And I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but that is my opinion, because he should have that one is just like, that one got to me, because seeing him in the body cam footage when they arrested him, just,
it's skin crawling.
Infuriated me. It infuriated me, because he was like so nonchalant about it. I don't want to get off on a rant on another case, but like, that one is one where I'm like, nah, line him up and right here and be done, because he doesn't deserve to sit in jail and take our tax money to be fed, clothed, showered, any of it. And I feel the same way about her.
That's my thing is our taxpayers' money is going into these jails, and a lot of the judicial system is stating like, we're running out of room. When you look at prisons and, long-term facilities that are open, we're running out of room.
Right.
And when you look at it back in the day, we used to do that. Like, if you stole something, you got your hand cut off. If you killed somebody, the manner in which you did that, like, that was done to you. And so that's why when I asked that, and it kind of brought that up, in conversation just a few minutes ago, is, do you think that because of the trauma and the things that we are actually going through, that we are creating evil, dark people? Or is it because we're just a little bit more lenient? Like this, the judge said, they'll feed you. You don't deserve to be fed.
No, absolutely not. She deserves to be lying in a 6-foot hole in the ground, in my opinion, just like her daughter.
Yeah.
Let her sit in a cell for 10 days without food. Give her a couple of water bottles until she runs out. And let her starve to death, just like her daughter did.
I agree.
That's the way it should be. And it's just like with pedophiles. Cut it off. They can't do it anymore if they don't have it.
Yep. And with her, it's her family, her parents are pleading for her mercy. Well, her mental health will be taken care of in prison. She's going to get a psych evaluation. She's going to get medicated. She's going to get 3 meals a day. She's going to be
Too late.
Yeah,
It's too
and
late
it's like,
for that, in my opinion.
why is the taxpayers' money, why are we paying for that? She admitted to it. There is no rhyme or reason as to, did she not? She did it. So I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
In my opinion, you are wasting space. It's time
Yeah,
for
and
you to go.
Here's my thing. I just watched, I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix. It's a new show that just came out. Unlocked. If you haven't watched it, you'll like it. And a lot of, for me, what I sit here and I'm a true crime junkie. I'm a true crime fan. Like, I love this stuff. I'm like you. I'm the why. Why did they do it? What can we do? How can we fix it? Like, that's my brain. That's how my brain works. For me, it's like, you see these murderers and things like that, and it's like, done. If they did it, out. They're done. There's no reason we should be paying for them. It's the ones that are in there that have done, yes, they've still done crimes. Yes, they're still criminals. Yes, they have done things that they shouldn't have done. But it's the ones that are in there that are sitting in there that want to be helped and want to change and want the rehabilitation. Let our tax money go to them. Put them in a rehabilitation center. Put them in classes to help them. They're the ones that are sitting in there, locked behind a cell door for 23 hours a day, and they're out for 1 hour a day. I'd go crazy too. Are you kidding me? Like, if I had to be locked in a cell for 23 hours a day and I was out for 1, I would act exactly the same way that those men and women act too. I'd act like a freaking wild animal, and it's no reason that they come out and they end up right back in there. They don't know how to act. They don't know how to succeed in society because, like everybody says, they're institutionalized. Well, look how they're treated. They're treated like freaking wild animals. If they want to change and they want that rehabilitation, that's where our tax money should be going, to the ones that want to change and the ones that want the help, not to feed these evil, disgusting, horrible human beings like her and like the guy that lined up his 3 children and killed them for whatever reason.
Yep. Well, I appreciate everybody who's still listening and hung in there for this episode. Like I said in the beginning, this is a hard one. I think it's even more hard because there's not a lot of twists and turns. It's very black and white. This happened. She did it. She chose to do it. It wasn't for any other reason than what she's claiming of mental health. I want to end this episode because the lead detective, his name was TJ Powell. At the sentencing, it was so powerful because they, like I said, through this whole thing, they have done the worst of the worst when it comes to investigation and the details and the autopsy. This is something that will haunt this law enforcement group for a very, very long time. But he made such an incredible impact because he stood there at her sentencing and stated that her name does stand for something now. Her name was spelled Jailyn, and we're closing this episode out because the J stands for justice that will be received today. A is for the angel wings she earned on that dreadful day. I is for the incremental repetition buildup of suspense for a death that clearly makes no sense. L is for the lack of love while alone for 11 days. Y is for a young life that was taken away. And N is for new eternal life Jailyn gained on that day. No child should ever have to die this way. That was said from the lead detective, TJ Powell, and I thought that was truly amazing of how they still look at this terrible loss and tragedy. And again, we have our why, and that still will never, ever bring her back. And I think this is a true crime case that a lot of people just feel to their core that this is what evil, true evil, really looks like.